Thank you. Thanks, Bill, for that largely inaccurate and overly generous introduction. He said all the nice things about me. You should hear what the bad things are that they said about me. In fact, Bobby Kennedy just walked by me as I was getting ready to come up here, and he said, "Go break a leg." I said, "Great." He said, "No, I mean really, break a leg." I'm here today to talk about this improbable presidential race. Isn't it amazing? It really is remarkable. This is one of the more exciting, unpredictable twists and turns that we've seen in American presidential politics in a long time. It's the longest presidential election in history. Seriously. In fact, it is the largest succession struggle in a democracy in the history of the world, which is not a good thing. The first presidential candidate to enter the race this time around entered the contest on December 6, 2006, nearly 2 years before the election. By comparison, Bill Clinton announced for president on October 16th of 1991, just over 13 months before the election. George W. Bush made his first speech in June of 1999. But this contest got going early, got going quick, and got going hard. The second debate on the Democratic side was February of 2007. We're subjecting these people to a lot. I've been through 2 of these contests. Running for president is the most sort of demanding physical activity that you can have short of combat or sustained athletic pursuit. And we're going to run these candidates around the country for 2 years, make them live in aluminum tubes with wheels or jets. They're going to sleep in strange beds, and they're not going to have a single moment to think, to contemplate, to talk, to discuss. They're going to be running from pillar to post. And about the time that they're completely and utterly physically and mentally exhausted, one of them is going to win, and we're going to say, "Raise your right hand and repeat after me, I do solemnly swear." And it's not healthy for the country, just is not. But what an amazing contest. The front runner in the polls didn't win either nomination. Remember about a year ago, it was Rudy and it was Hillary. Neither one of them won. Neither nominee of the Republican or Democratic parties got a majority of the vote in the primary caucuses. Barack Obama came close, but both of them only got a plurality of the vote. We have the largest number of undecided and weakly linked voters, voters who've made a preference but are hesitant about following through on it, the largest number of those since 1968. And we're going to have an election that's going to cost us over $1 billion when you total it all up, all the spending in the primary and the general election. In fact, we're likely to see somewhere north of $600 million spent in September and October. On the other hand, we are, after all, electing the leader of the free world, so I'm not really worried about spending $1 billion. We're a country that spends $8 billion on hair care products, $40 billion on soft drink purchases, and $110 billion at the convenience store. So spending $1 billion to elect the leader of it is not really bad. The issue that was big and dominated at the start is much smaller here towards the end, Iraq. And we have 2 improbable tickets. We got the bright, dynamic, charismatic African-American, the first to lead a major party ticket, who served in his freshman term in the United States Senate and has attended 143 days of business in the United States Senate. And because he's the candidate of fresh and new and change, he picked as his running mate the 4th most senior member of the United States Senate, who was elected in 1972. He's not only long-serving, he's got a reputation for being long-winded. On the Republican side, we picked the maverick Republican who is disliked and detested by most of the Republican leadership in the Congress and by many grassroots activists across the country, and yet he's their nominee. And he picked as his running mate the freshman governor of the state of Alaska, who could shoot it, field dress it, fillet it, and fix it. Now the Democrats should be way ahead. They should be way ahead. This should be no contest. The economy's a little rocky. We got an unpopular war. And there's a natural desire at the end of 8 years of one-party run in the White House, there's a natural desire for change. And yet this race is like this. The Gallup Daily Tracking Poll yesterday was Obama in the lead by 2 points. Real Clear Politics average was 1.8% lead for Obama. And the Rasmussen and AP polls say a 1-point lead. In fact, we've seen pretty dramatic movement. In the last 2 weeks, 10% of the American electorate has changed their attitude about who they're voting for. They were for Obama, then they went temporarily for McCain, and now they're back to a very narrow lead for Obama. And the movement towards McCain has been exactly what he would want. Older, white, working-class voters and independents. And we've got an election, the first election maybe since 1960, in which the vice presidential nominee will actually make a difference. In 1960, Lyndon Baines Johnson made a difference in the election because he kept Texas in the Democratic column, and without it, Richard Nixon would have been elected president in 1960. Now, I'm not certain that McCain is really worried about Alaska's 3 electoral votes. But we have a vice presidential nominee on the Republican side who herself would be an historic, the first woman vice president of the United States, who has shaken up this race by developing a visceral connection with Americans that is really rare in American politics. Now, as you look at the next 40-some-odd days in the race, I want you to think about 4 battles going on simultaneously. Because these campaigns are constantly fighting battles over 4 different landscapes. Attributes, issues, groups, and states. The attributes, each one of them has chosen sort of their label. The experienced maverick reformer versus the change and cares about you. And each one of them is going to be fighting to establish their own credentials on that label. And each used their vice president to ameliorate some challenges they saw when it came to attributes. Neither one of these people sat down and said, who is the most qualified person to serve as vice president of the United States? Both of them sat down and said, how do I solve a political problem? Barack Obama said, I don't have foreign policy credentials. Russia's just invaded South Ossetia and Georgia, and so what do I do to get foreign policy credentials? And McCain said, I've had a good June, July, and August, but what do I do to really shake up the dynamic of the race, to create a lot of excitement and attention with a risky pick that's going to pay off big or pay off bad? So far, paid off pretty good. What's interesting to me is if you look at it, as tight as the race has been over the last several months, there have nonetheless been big shifts underneath the surface. In the Washington Post ABC poll, which was run just about a week ago, compared to what it was a month or 6 weeks before, John McCain gained ground on all 5 attributes that were tested in the poll. Better commander-in-chief, stronger leader. He's now seen as more honest and trustworthy than Obama, and he's even cut the lead that Obama had on bringing about needed change by a net of 20 points. You saw this in the Fox poll, where they asked, if you had to ask for somebody for advice on the most important and difficult decision in your life, who would you ask, McCain or Obama? And the answer was McCain 50, Obama 34. But they're going to be fighting each of them to establish their narrative and to mitigate the narrative of the other. They're also going to be fighting about issues. And again, it's an interesting election. They don't want to talk about the same things. A lot of elections, people say, let's argue about the same things. In this election, each one of them's got their own narrative. McCain wants to talk about the war on terror, and then he wants to talk about economy, taxes, and spending as they affect jobs and the economy. But it's energy, taxes, and spending. Obama doesn't want to talk about international affairs at all. He wants to talk about the economy, jobs, health care, and he does want to talk about taxes, but in a different way than McCain. Again, what's interesting to me is in the last several weeks, while the race has been sort of vibrating around, but before the Democratic Convention was essentially tied, and it's essentially tied today, McCain has nonetheless, in these public polls, gained advantages. In the Fox poll, he improved his leads on terror and Iraq, and cut Obama's lead on energy, economy, and health care. And it's essentially tied on energy and the economy. In the Washington Post ABC poll, we saw a similar trend. They had 9 issues they measured. And on 8 of those issues, McCain gained. Some of them with big leads already, expanded his leads. Where he had deficits, he cut them, and where it was tied, he moved into a small lead. We've seen this play out this week in the economy, which has been really interesting to me to see this whole week play out on the economy. It is a reminder of how volatile this race is and how much it's going to be determined by what happens. This race, more than a lot of races in our history, what the candidates say and do every single day is going to matter. And what happens in the broader world or the broader nation matters. One of my favorite quotes is from Prime Minister